A wealthy heiress from one of the most powerful families in Europe. A woman who couldn't meet the demands of Jeffrey Epstein. And over time, according to her own testimony, that led her to constantly find new women for him. A woman educated at Oxford, surrounded by privilege, connections, and access to the world's most powerful elites from a very young age. The woman who, for years, moved within the closest circle of Jeffrey Epstein, becoming part of his inner environment and accompanying him through every stage of his rise. A woman who understood how power worked, how to move, how to belong, and who, according to multiple testimonies, not only knew what was happening, but held a central role within that network. A figure who connected people, who arranged meetings, and who facilitated access. Always in the background, always out of the spotlight. A woman who went from the most exclusive circles to the center of one of the most significant investigations of recent decades. Accused of participating in a network of exploitation of minors, and directly linked to one of the darkest cases of modern power. A case that, for years, revolved around Epstein, but ultimately revealed something more. A structure, a system, and a figure that, for far too long, no one wanted to look at. Because the story of Ghislaine Maxwell is not just the story of an accomplice. It is the story of someone who knew how to move within power, and who ended up becoming part of something much bigger. This is Behind the Icon, and this is the story of Ghislaine Maxwell. But this story doesn't begin with Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell was born in 1961 into one of the most influential families in the United Kingdom. Her father, Robert Maxwell, was a media magnate, powerful, influential, and surrounded by an extensive network of contacts. From a very young age, Ghislaine grew up in an environment of privilege, money, connections, access, a world where power wasn't something distant, but part of everyday life. And in that environment, she learned something essential: how to move, how to connect, and how to belong. For years, that life seemed stable. Ghislaine studied at Oxford. She moved in exclusive circles. She built her identity within that world. But everything changed in 1991. Her father died under circumstances that raised questions. And shortly after, a financial scandal of enormous magnitude came to light. A collapse of reputation, of power, and of structure. Overnight, the world she had grown up in disappeared. And that's when she made a key decision. She moved to the United States. In New York, a new figure appears: Jeffrey Epstein, a man on the rise, with money, with connections, and with access to circles of power. The connection between them is immediate. They share the same environment, they share ambition, and they share something more: the ability to move within elite circles. But while Epstein was building his network, Maxwell brought something different: social experience, connections, and a particular ability to connect people. Very quickly, she became a key figure. Not always visible, not always the main focus, but absolutely essential. And to truly understand the world Ghislaine Maxwell moved in, it's necessary to talk about her connections. For years, Maxwell was photographed alongside some of the most influential figures in the world: politicians, business leaders, celebrities, exclusive events, private gatherings, spaces not everyone could access, images that show her not as an outsider but as part of that environment, integrated, accepted, and completely at ease within those circles. Because beyond the accusations, there is something difficult to ignore: the level of access she had, and the ease with which she moved among some of the most powerful people in the world. But before we continue, there are 3 aspects that help explain her place within that environment. 1, her access to the elite. Maxwell didn't need to get in. She already belonged to that world. 2, her social ability. She knew how to connect people, how to build trust, how to move without raising suspicion. 3, her silent role. She wasn't the public face, but she was always present behind the scenes. And in that kind of structure, sometimes the most important role is the one you don't see. Over time, the relationship between Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein becomes more established. And along with that, something much bigger begins to take shape. A network, a system, an environment where everything seemed to function normally, but where signs were starting to appear, testimonies, comments, situations that were difficult to explain. And in many of those accounts, Maxwell's name kept coming up as someone present, active, and part of how everything worked. But for years, all of this remained in the background, because the environment protected them, and because power, many times, neutralizes questions. As the years go by, the accusations begin to take shape. Epstein's name becomes public, the case grows, and along with it, Maxwell's name also starts to appear. But once again, the impact isn't immediate. The system resists, and for a time, everything seems to keep functioning. But by the mid-2000s, the accusations stop being rumors and become a case. Several minors accuse Jeffrey Epstein of abuse. The investigation moves forward. The accusations grow. And for the first time, Jeffrey Epstein's name is publicly associated with something completely different. The impact is immediate. But what happens next is surprising. In 2008, the case is resolved through a plea deal, an agreement that avoids a federal trial and results in a significantly lighter sentence than many had expected. The result? Epstein serves a reduced sentence, under special conditions, and shortly after, he regains his freedom. For many, that moment marks something deeper. It's not just a legal outcome. It's a signal. After the conviction, he could have disappeared. He could have stepped away and stayed out of sight. But Jeffrey chose the opposite. Not only did he returned to the same circles. Events, meetings, connections. His name remained present. His contacts did too. As if nothing had changed. As if that episode had not been enough. And that raises an unavoidable question. How can someone with that level of exposure rebuild their place so quickly? The answer isn't simple, but it always points to the same thing: power, relationships, and influence. But before we continue, there are 3 details that were already raising doubts around Jeffrey Epstein. 1, the mystery surrounding his fortune. For years, it was never entirely clear how he made his money or who his clients really were. 2, his lifestyle, properties in different parts of the world, constant travel, and a level of access reserved for very few. 3, the persistent rumors, comments that had been circulating for years about behavior and situations that were difficult to justify. Signs that were there, but for a long time, they weren't enough to stop him. But in 2019, everything changes. Jeffrey Epstein is arrested. The case returns, but with much greater force, more visibility, more pressure, more global attention. And this time, the structure begins to crack. And then, a crucial moment occurs. Jeffrey Epstein is found dead in his cell. The official cause? Suicide. But almost immediately, doubts begin to emerge. Errors, failures in protocol, circumstances that are difficult to explain. And with that, something changes. Because the case doesn't close. It transforms. It goes from being an investigation to becoming a symbol of everything that wasn't resolved, of everything that wasn't explained, and of everything that was left unfinished. Shortly after Maxwell is arrested, accused of having actively participated in the recruitment and exploitation of minors. For the first time, her role is no longer in the shadows. The legal process moves forward. Evidence is presented. Testimonies, accounts, details that had remained in the background for years begin to take center stage. And with that, the focus shifts. It's no longer just Jeffrey Epstein. It's everything surrounding him, the connections, the structure, and the people who were part of that environment. And at the center of that scene, Maxwell appears. During the trial, her figure stops being unclear. She is no longer in the shadows and begins to be examined in detail. Her role, her involvement, her place within the system. Until finally, the verdict arrives. Ghislaine Maxwell is found guilty and sentenced to prison. Today, she remains in custody, in conditions that, for many, inevitably recall those of Epstein. A parallel that once again brings the focus not only to what happened, but also to everything that surrounded this case from the very beginning. Ghislaine Maxwell grew up in power. She moved within it, she understood it, and she knew how to use it. For years, she was part of one of the most exclusive environments in the world, but also of one of the darkest cases. Her story is not just that of an heiress, nor that of a secondary figure. It is the story of someone who was at the center of a system that, for years, operated in plain sight. Because when power, connections, and silence come together, questions may disappear for a while, but in the end, they all come back at once. This was Behind the Icon. And this was the story of Ghislaine Maxwell. A story where power, influence, and decisions ultimately led to consequences. A story shaped by power, connections, and a series of events that still raise questions today. Because even after the death of Jeffrey Epstein, many questions remain unanswered. If you're interested in these kinds of stories, subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments which story you'd like us to cover next, which figure, which story, or which case you'd like us to explore in depth. Because in Behind the Icon, behind every figure, there is much more than meets the eye. And in every story, there's always something that doesn't fully add up.